I want you to go into culture. What is culture?
I used to say it's a metaphorical ecosystem of shared belief created by an influencer and maintained by the alignment of the influenced. Now, I may have been influenced by marijuana when I wrote that. I've been trying to figure out what is culture for a long time. And I think, and everyone has a different view of how to talk about it and explain it. And I think that's part of what culture is, different views of how to explain it and to live it. And it comes down to how people that run their organizations want to run them. Simply, culture is people. And we have work to do that can get in the way of people. We can forget that we're the customers that we serve. We can forget that, why we're doing all this work in the first place. I think part of the reason culture has become such a buzzword, ubiquitous and opaque, right? It's everywhere and not clear. It's unclear. Well, because the big questions of the world are unclear. But what is everywhere? I think we have a business culture telling us we should feel shamed if we work in our business. I think we have a business culture that is explicitly and implicitly conditioning us to think someone else should be doing what we could do. I think we have a culture, like a general macro culture, that's unclear of its identity. The lack of dialogue, like if a company stops talking to itself, what happens to its identity becomes unclear, and now it's fighting amongst itself. It's fighting internally. So we're all within a macro culture that's fighting internally at a level of exclusion and divisiveness. I think our general culture is screaming out for leadership. Where are our leaders? Who are our leaders? Who do we trust to follow?
One thing I wrote down, and as you were talking throughout this whole thing, I said the failure of a culture is the lack of communication, vision, leadership, and negative perception of time. Welcome to The Real Build. I'm your host, Bill Reiman, your broker builder. And today I got a very special guest on my show. He's a good friend of mine. We've become really good friends. Naples guys, we're local. He's a husband, new husband, culture expert, author, leader, one of the most brilliant minds I've ever talked to in my life. I can talk to this guy for hours. One of the smartest guys that I know. Probably read over 1,000 books, probably 2,000 books. He'll talk about that a little bit. He was actually the main reason that I relaunched this podcast. Him and I had a lot of discussions together about it, and it feels great to be back. But Jay Doran, welcome to The Real Build, brother. Happy to have you on.
I'm happy that I could influence that one decision that would lead me to now self-glorify myself and just pontificate about whatever I think. I'm honored to be here. And I
Yeah.
lost my voice for yelling with you yesterday.
Yeah, me and Jay were on a phone call. Jay was yelling in excitement, and his voice went out right then and there. But we are still here. We are going to record this thing. But let's
Yeah,
get
I'll just
into it. Let's get into it, man. Let's find out a little bit about you. For those that don't know, the man of mystery, Jay Doran. Who are you? What do you do? And let's get into it a little bit here.
I think if I knew I wouldn't do what it is that I do that so who am I? This quote that Kierkegaard I want to share. Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. The whole culture matters started originally when in team meetings I was pushed. Pushed is not. I felt pushed but I was really influenced by a mentor, a friend, a business partner at the time to be the one to facilitate the team meeting of our company or a team meeting, like a gathering. And from what I remember vaguely of the time, I was looking for inspiration. And when I'm anxious throughout my life, life can only be understood backwards, it must be lived forwards. I'd go to the bookstore or get a book or look for information to overcome that angst, uncertainty. And yeah, so this partner says, you should be the one to run these meetings or run the meet. I don't recall the exact wording, but it was a positive influence. And so I remember being at Barnes and Noble, walking through about halfway through Barnes and Noble, and to my right periphery, this book stood out to me. I don't know why, but it was like blue and white, and it just popped. It was like kind of interesting cover. And I walked up to it and, holding in my hand, it says uncontainable. And I open it up, I look to the left hand panel where it describes, that's a short explanation of what the book is about and why it's significant. The author is hoping that we read it. Right? And it said something to effect of, thousands of locations, very low employee turnover, the average employee being paid a significant sum per capita above market rates. And we started the Container Store, 1978. Kip Tyndall started the Container Store with the idea of getting organized. Hundreds of locations later, having achieved that mission, we did it because of our 7 principles. I don't recall any of the principles, but what I recall is that I thought, well, what are ours? What do we stand for as a culture? How can I implement this to potentially create something like they had? I'd recommend the book to people listening. Why not? Uncontainable. It's a powerful story of a tried and true company, the Container Store. Was it that specific book that was like the tipping point? No, but that was what happened originally, to my memory, is being jarred. Like, what are our values? What do we stand for? Who are we as an organization? How to transfer the energy and the excitement and the inspiration of myself and my partner at the time, which was his vision, uh, his creation, uh, and helping him achieve that. Be excited about his vision, his creation, and how can that be translated to many, many more people. So what happened was I came up with what I thought the values of the company were, let's say, could be, what we strive for if we were to be the strongest group team in the best interest of the customer. The only value I remember was the first 3 steps. It's the first one. When the customer walks through the door, they get greeted with a warm, hearty hello. The experience starts at the door and ends with a goodbye. Now, this is where that value became genius to me. It was talked about every day. I internalized all of these, brought them up in these gatherings, included the team in them, talking about them. And something that I witnessed happen was people actually did get greeted when they walked through the door. They didn't just get greeted. There was a brilliant marketing strategy to my former partner's giftedness in this way, where when they this is old 10 years ago, that about the customer walked through the door, they get greeted and they'd be given a water bottle, and it's like, hey, would you mind checking in on your Facebook?
Mm.
So it was the synthesis of actually smiling to the customer, being open, acknowledging them, which I believe was rooted in that value, which filtered through me actually doing it and saying it and being excited about
Mm-hmm.
it. And I was. Right? That then in combination with the actual ask of any line level employee can ask, hey, would you mind checking in? Here's, good morning, how are you? Here's something. Would you mind something? That exploded. That was just one example. It just exploded. And definitely at the time, it struck me, it was like behavioral psychology and economics and all these things that I'd later read and learn and discover at, starting Culture Matters. Um, to see the results of the culture, the feeling, like it was the level of inspiration of those that worked with us and those that we got to serve, like customers, affirmed parts of who I was that I had yet discovered and had been able to explore. So I bring up the Kierkegaard quote: life can only be understood backwards and must be lived forwards. If I'm looking backwards, I had someone who uh, admired me and invested in me as a human being. Um, when I say invested, I mean they invested their business in the talents that I had, the skills that I had, and the people that I knew that I brought to the table. I mean, I brought all these resources to the table, and so they saw something in me. They thought that I would do what I ended up doing, which was lead the people.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that I'd be doing a great job at that. I did. It helped me wake up, at another level of awareness of who I was and what value I could provide, and really help me explore my vision. There's other lessons there because ultimately this is where had they done it and led by example, I likely would still be within their culture today. Um, that's how the company started. That's how the idea that values articulated and then represented in actions by those with authority, like the leaders, can make a business more than just work.
Mm-hmm.
I lived it, and prior to that experience, I was living that in, because that's ultimately like that's who I am as a person. If I'm going to work, it's going to be exciting, and people will be excited about it. How to translate that, right? How to teach that. So I went into this. Became extremely inspired to figure out what is culture.
Okay.
It was I was it just values? Yes and no. Values are a component of culture. They're a component of transferring the the whatever inspires the founders of a company to the people, the customer, the employees, the vendors, and and so on. Anyway, the journey started in that experience where I saw the fruit of culture.
And that's where
There's,
Culture Matters
we,
was born.
yeah, it was like it absolutely matters.
Okay.
People matter. Like, what is culture? Yeah,
Answer
culture is
that.
people.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that a little bit. Answer, let's
Well,
go
and I
into
want to
that.
add something. I'd
Yeah.
spend the next almost 10 years experimenting, reading, working alongside many individuals like my original partner,
Hmm.
uh, who saw something in this rambunctious, manic-ish, enthusiastic, creative consultant in New York City. Because at the time, the first consulting opportunity I ever created, because I created it for myself, was a gym in Tribeca, New York, that I thought could be operated in a more efficient, productive way. And the owners of that business gave me an opportunity to essentially change how they sold and marketed and could um, let's sell their existing customer base in ways that would increase the client experience, would lower the labor costs, increase the revenue, make maybe a deeper dive for another podcast. But ultimately, that's what was going on prior to starting a brand with a visionary, with a founder, with a founder, uh, which is where the idea that culture mattered was born through me. I'm not the first to say culture matters. I won't be the last. I hope. That'd be silly. Um, it's the more one learns in business and studies and reads, you realize how many of the great thought leaders in business believed that culture was important.
Hmm.
But essentially, I was like discovering my own gifts for advisory and consulting and being a helper and not being the number one in number one's stories, but being an addition to the number ones of number one stories.
Hmm.
And that was discovered in that brand, which has become successful um, in its own right. Uh, yeah,
Isn't that kind of crazy how your path, God's path for you, took you to where you are right now? I mean, that what you just said, how it all played out into Culture Matters, into what you're doing today. Um, the Barnes and Noble experience, going in there, reading a book, being around the people you were currently at that time, viewing the culture and just being able to assess the culture in your mind of how it could be better as well. Um, does that amaze you? That you know that's how this all progressed. It was kind of God's path for you to get here.
I I've only lived my life, so the perspective that I have is this is my life has been, if I fall into a victim narrative, I would say, which I could very well easily do. It's a series of unfortunate events. I have been blessed with great family, unbelievable strangers, going out of their way to help me with my self exploration of trying to become a person, trying to become successful. Um, you know, all my uh, former intimate relationships that may or may not have constructive words to say of who I was then. I didn't like that guy either. That's why, yeah, that paradox, you know. Um, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know that answer because I could look at it and say how, oh, because yeah, I think if I were to do an autobiography at some point, I thought of doing like, either or, like the first 30 years and then put it all out there on the table because there's been a lot of experiences. But I don't know how to answer your question.
Let
I
me,
don't know how to answer your question.
yeah,
I don't.
I'll, I
Just
can,
eating.
I can rephrase it a little bit too, because you just said you could use the victim narrative, but you're not going to. And there's a lot of people that do. Um, I don't claim the victim narrative either, but there are a lot of events that happen in my life that have led, good and bad, to where I've become today. And there'll be more along that pathway. Um, it's the road I have it tattooed on my arm. It's a man walking. There's a giant mountain in front of him, and then there's a lighted cross leading the way. You got to climb over the mountain to get to the top, obviously, but it's all the hurdles, all the battles, all the things that you've gone through. Life's not easy. It's hard. We all know that. You've had unfortunate events, but I think those unfortunate events mold people into who they are. I don't think Jay Doran would be Jay Doran if you didn't go through what you did. Your past things, your relationships, your experience as a child, and all those things have led you to the man you are now. And there'll be more along that pathway too, where you can go left or right. We all have choices. Um, but I know your story a little. I don't know the full story, but you and I have gotten to know each other better and stuff. And I just think a lot of what you've become too, you've excelled a lot better. You don't dwell on the past like you said, and I commend you for it. That's what I'm getting at. You've turned the things that you've faced into where you are today. You're probably one of the most hardworking human beings I've ever met. So credit to you on that too. Um, but you are a leader in a lot of ways too. You've helped me in ways that you don't know. You've helped a lot of other people in ways you don't know. But that's just who you've become. So that's what I'm kind of getting at with that question is these past things that you face, good and bad, have led to, in the story you just told too, they've led to who you are now. And there's more to come too. You and I were talking about it last night on the phone, the things that that's happening for you, 550 podcasts, like, you're killing it with that. But to you as an entrepreneur, you're just getting started, and that's what's leading this pathway of Jay Duran, this story, and that's what I want you to get into a little bit more. That's where that question came from, is just you've gone through what you've gone through, and now you are where you are, but there's much more to come. You see where I was going with that whole thing?
Sure.
So, um, let's go to, I want you to go into culture. What is culture? What's it
Well,
defined to Jay? Uh, what's your definition of culture?
I, I have a few in 30 days of thought, and I'm laughing because uh, it's like Kierkegaard said, once you label me, you negate me. And I now that I've unlearned so much, I used to say it's a metaphorical ecosystem of shared belief created by an influencer and maintained by the alignment of the influenced. Now, I may have been influenced by marijuana when I wrote that because, like, Can culture be architected? Yeah, it can. Fascism, um, and any the institutions that it all looks great on the outside, and on the inside there's gulags. So, example, there's two theses that undergird culture matters: the wireless journey and the culture puzzle. The culture puzzle is understanding story, language, symbolism, mediums, and the hero that leads to, let's say, culture. But arguably, every business needs to have story, needs to have, has language, explicit and even it's just like the unspoken behaviors that, right, there's symbolism, how it's represented, how people view it, and the rituals that occur, however clear that they are to those that lead the organization. And of course, then there's leadership. There's how those with authority, influence, and power lead their people. So, I had these. I've been trying to figure out what is culture for a long time, and I think, and everyone has a different view of how to talk about it and explain it. And I think that's part of what culture is: different views of how to explain it and to live it. And it comes down to how people that run their organizations want to run them. And the best I try to do is get around people that want to, they at least have an idea that they want to improve how they run them. Simply, culture is people, and we have work to do that can get in the way of people. We can forget that we're the customers that we serve. We can forget that, why we're doing all this work in the first place. We can forget society. We can forget community. We can forget family. We can lose our individuality in the pursuit of our goals, of our visions, of our uh, pursuits. Culture is like trying to fight to maintain what is meaningful and beautiful in the pursuit of what we desire, of what we think we want, of what we think we need. The distinction between what we think we need and what we actually need. But yeah, I have these highfalutin definitions that have utility. I mean, you could have a class on what is culture with 30 students and experiment with these ideas, and maybe people leave that class having a different view of how they lead, having a different view of what their business has that's working, and has that isn't working, and could have that could work better. I don't, it's interesting enough that, like, when I think part of the reason culture has become such a buzzword, ubiquitous and opaque, right? It's everywhere and not clear. It's unclear. Well, because the big questions of the world are unclear. But what is everywhere? I think we have a business culture telling us we should feel shamed if we work in our business. I think we have a business culture that is explicitly and implicitly conditioning us to think someone else should be doing what we could do.
Hmm.
I think we have a culture, like a general, like, macro culture, that's unclear of its identity, because we live in a country that's unclear of its identity. It's in a transition period of, it's in a period of the lack of dialogue. Like if a company stops talking to itself, what happens to its identity becomes unclear, and now it's fighting amongst itself. It's fighting internally. so we're all within a macro culture that's fighting internally at a level of exclusion and divisiveness that's impacting all of us at some level. So um, part of the reason I'm so excited to get up and work as much as you said you believe that I am and that we are as an organization is because I desire to answer these questions.
Hmm.
And I'm attempting to answer them with people that have given me the opportunity to answer them with them, right? Those would be the people that we've been able to work with over years and years and years. But we're talking about leadership, we're talking about uh, organizational structure, we're talking about marketing, brand, we're talking about um, community, rituals, we're talking about the values, so we could spend the whole time talking today about, well, what are your company's values? How are they how are they implemented? You know, how are they not? But do they just digress into, hey, if I'm ownership, none of you are living these values, as opposed to ownership knowing what to do with themselves and why they're doing it and where they're going next so they can actually work, like, right, sacrifice what they want now and go to what they want in the future to model those values for the people that work for them. When values become they can become clear, like written down and described, and then either never discussed again or looked at, and then only taken out when the parent needs a paddle to hit their child's ass from transgressions against the culture. What's the value of the values? Though the values have no value. The values are meaningless. They only have force. They don't have. They're not coming from an empowering standpoint. So, like, how to even implement values? Well, I have my own way of modeling. Shadowing the ownership, understanding what their values are in action, writing them, creating them, and then helping them realize how they're in contradiction with those values and how they have to internalize those values and how they have to learn how to listen and ask questions and tell the truth. And their people do that back with them so that the company's living out the values. Are they talked about in the team meetings? How are they talked about? But we could spend we could just focus on the values piece, right? The language piece and the value of values. If employees are thinking in values, well, then in theory, that could help them make decisions without second guessing. Right? We all share the same values in the company. However, if the people in the position of control of the company, the people at the top of the hierarchy, are not actually acting out those values themselves, then the goal that they have of more productivity is not going to occur um, at the level that it could.
How do
In
you?
fact, go ahead.
I, I want to go into what you just said there, though. If the CEO is not acting out the values, and obviously you're consulting them, how do you go about that if they're not willing to? If a certain thing happens and they're not willing to address it, and you as their consultant, you as maybe a friend, I'm sure you become close to these people that you work with. It's hard not to. You're involved in their business pretty closely. Um, how do you address situations where they're not willing to make the change? See where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, Tolstoy, the two greatest warriors are patience and time.
Hmm.
So it's a combination of modeling and talking.
Yeah.
Right. Modeling is representing what the values are in action, and talking is telling the truth. It's, hey, this is what I see. That's not happening,
Okay.
and having conversation. But two greatest warriors are patience and time. You're talking about people. I've never met a business owner that wasn't learning as they went, and part of learning is unlearning. Why do you think there's a proliferation of investment in companies, private companies? Because people don't know what the hell they're doing. If they did, they likely wouldn't start. So it's patience and time and playing the long game, growing with someone, just like any company with any customers, growing with them. You know, Mentors lose mentees, but do they really? If they showed up, righteous. Nietzsche said, the
Mhm.
student that doesn't outshine the master has let both himself and the master down. And that's the constructive nature of that. What about the mentor that's let the mentee down? Well, there's going to be a lesson on both sides. That's where that conversation between responsibility and accountability is important. I think that responsibility is modeled in behavior, and accountability is given or taken. Like, example, I'm responsible for this task. Check. I've done the task. Time and time again, I showed up and done the task. The results speak for me. The results speak for me. Now I'm promoted to be responsible for someone else. I have a responsibility to them and myself on the task and the person. I've elevated from the task where the results of it gave a feedback to everyone around me. I'm the man, I'm the woman, I'm the best, I'm that person. I'm up now. I'm not just responsible for the task, my ability to respond to the task at hand to get that outcome. Now it's my ability to respond to the task at hand to get that outcome, and maybe someone else that has a task and an outcome. My degree of responsibility, up or down, has a relationship with my peers and my subordinates and my authorities' necessity of holding me to account. Bill, you're not doing enough podcasts based on this opinion. Well, Jay, what do you mean by that? Or, Jay, I disagree with that. And here's why. Or, Jay, like, we're having a conversation now. We
Mhm.
can talk about my opinion of your podcasts. Jay, you're telling Jay, you're not going on enough podcasts and talking about culture. Well, Bill, the reason I'm not is because of this reason or that reason. Jay, that's a bunch of hogwash bullshit. Here's why. I never really thought about that, Bill. But now, let's say in different context, you've told me that 7 times and I just brushed it off, or maybe I told you to go to hell. You may not help me out in the future of what you think I'm doing wrong. That could be done better. So now my relationship with the truth is going to be less clear because the people on my team are holding me to account less. Let's say that I'm responsible for other people. Right? I have a responsibility to other people. Part of that is holding them to account. It's telling them what I think and what I feel about their behavior. What if I don't? What if I don't tell them? Like, they work for me. What if I don't tell them what I think and what I feel? What if I tell someone else? So now it's an A. It went from an A conversation to B conversation. to an A conversation and a C conversation about B. How is that going to increase or decrease my responsibility, my ability to respond to conflict as a leader? I would argue it will decrease it. You know, you ask me, what is culture? It's how people interact, how people work in the workplace. It's a distinction between brand and reputation, like modern day brand and reputation. If brand is perception of reality, reputation is, it's funny, brand used to be reputation. Today it's something else. You know, culture is what actually happens, and ideally, like advertising would be what, you know, one that has yet to experience what actually could happen perceives that could happen, right? So yeah, I'm advertising my company because I'm hoping that I get the opportunity to serve someone. They've yet to work with me and experience the values of the company.
Mm-hmm.
They've yet to work to get the outcome. Culture is what actually happens. Brand is what may happen, what may have happened, right? Reputation, it takes Buffett, it takes you're a lifetime to build it and one decision to end it. That's the power of brand, part of why brand is so powerful. We don't have to be living our brand to continue to get value from our brand. It takes a while to destroy a brand once it's built. It takes the absence of the values that theoretically came before the brand. It takes a while for that brand to decay based on the absence of what actually happens. Culture is what actually happens, how people actually behave, how leadership is actually done. Um, how do we get to culture is like that secret formula. It's interesting because, I've met some great leaders of culture because they're just great leaders, and the culture kind of manifests itself over time. I think our general culture is screaming out for leadership. Where are our leaders? Who are our leaders? Who do we trust to follow? You know, um, that to answer your original question, what I do, I go back to that Tolstoy quote, patience and time, and to do the best job I can possibly do to my awareness of being responsible and holding people to account. What is being responsible? That's a whole nother podcast.
Oh, we'll have many more. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to just come on here and give a canned, even though I don't like to do the same thing twice, even though I've been working for years on what is culture and like, okay, the culture puzzle, what's the story? What's the language? What's the symbolism? What rituals do we have to actualize this culture? How do people actually behave? What's the leadership? How well do they lead? The hero, what's the hero? Like,
Well, go into
it can
that
just
too.
become like kind of,
Go
yeah,
into
go ahead.
go into that too, because I've heard you mention this a few times too. And because I've been writing down a lot of what you're saying with culture, and you just said it yourself. I know you've been on a few podcasts, and I don't want this to be repetitive either. I want to get deep with you on the mind of Jay Doran. And you talked about a secret formula to culture. Is the secret formula of a good culture having a good leader?
That's a pretty important piece because
Is
well, it
leadership,
depends. It
is it
depends.
everything?
It depends who's benefiting.
Yeah.
Like who? It depends who we're talking to. I mean, someone if and it depends what the whoever's in control of the
Can
organization.
you have a good culture without a good leader?
That's like a existential question.
I told you I'm hitting you with the harder ones.
That's why you're well. I thought about this before we started. A great interviewer becomes a great leader, like because you're thinking, you're asking questions, you're trying to figure out what is going on.
Hmm.
It's a humble act, and what are we actually trying to do when we run our businesses? We're trying to figure out what the problems are so we can fix them to ultimately better serve the customer.
Yes.
Leaders follow problems, followers follow leaders. So to answer your question, that becomes like it ends up if short answer, who wants to work for a tyrant? Someone that has to feed their family, to not be homeless, to send money overseas, to I mean, think about it. Who wants to work for someone that they don't respect, that they don't admire, that they don't think is better than them? In some context that's relevant to what they're doing, that feels, that respects them, that believes in them.
Hmm.
Who wants to work for a tyrant? If you're talking about culture, we're talking about meaning, we're talking about belief, we're talking about value, we're talking about things that are hard to even quantify, things that like deep questions, spiritual, it becomes spiritual. It's like, who wants to work for a tyrant? Who wants to live in, you know, a less like a country that gives them less choice once they've had what would be perceived as more choice? Someone that needs to, you know. So to answer to your question, like I have my own inherent bias that I've got to check to try to be the best servant to different people's what what they're trying to get to, or else I'm just going to I'm creating my own self image through the work of like what I think culture is. So that's the question I would ask people. Who wants to work for a tyrant? Someone that needs to. Well, what's the inverse of a tyrant? What is it? But like what would you say? What's the I guess what is a tyrant? What's the opposite of a tyrant? How, what would it be like working for the opposite of a tyrant? I would challenge the listeners to write down what they think. If they were working for a tyrant, what types of things would they face?
Mm.
I'll write a tyrant, and then what's the opposite of a tyrant? I mean, look, I'll look it up right now. Like, you know, I should do a screen share. Where's the why not? Right. Oh, I can't because I'm with the
Oh, here,
well
multiple
about
here. Yeah, there you go.
you know we're
But going into what you just said too, while you're looking at that, everything you were just saying about
A
good
ruler who
leader.
exercises absolute power oppressively or
Yep.
brutally. What's what's the opposite of that? I have to look for the antonym. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, what you were saying, I mean, it's exactly what we were getting at here. How can you have a good culture with a tyrant leader? Is exactly what you just said too. It's almost impossible because if there's hate, there's resentment within the culture. There's people that just plain don't like the CEO. There is no culture. But as with good leadership comes good culture because people want to be around a good leader. They want to uh, serve a good leader. They want to be a part of something because a good leader makes them a part of what the journey is, a part of what the overall vision is. A good leader, you know, lets them be involved in the journey, takes in their opinions of things as well, and asks them, "Hey, what do you think about this? Do you have recommendations here?" Those are the type of things that form a good culture, in my opinion. You have fun together with your employees. It's a serious work environment, but you all get along too. There's no tension anywhere. um, I can go on and on with this, but as you were talking, I drew like a bubble with a culture, with the word culture in it, and then it's surrounded by good leadership because good leadership protects that bubble from popping versus a tyrant. It's going to explode. Somebody's going to have a problem. The company is going to have an issue somewhere. Somebody's going to talk bad about the company when they leave with a sour taste in their mouth. There's just no way to have good culture, I don't think, without good leadership, is kind of what I'm getting out of our conversation
Well,
after a
we
lot of
can
this
have
talk.
cult without.
Okay.
We can. We can. And I'm not recommending that, by the way. That would be a manifestation of the absence of leadership. Would be cult. It's a closed system. People are afraid to tell the truth. The consequences of telling the truth would be shame. You see what I'm saying? Would be
Mm-hmm.
ostracization. One of the ironies of business is that oftentimes the people that let's say quit, they're the ones, you know, if the culture is digressed, they may actually be operating at a higher level of awareness and emotional intelligence and a greater understanding of what is true than the organization. But because the organization stopped listening, they checked out and their results checked out. And every time they have conversations with leadership, it becomes their fault and about them. And they never are heard and listened to. And the organization almost feeds on how it's their fault and not itself, to the point where not only is the problem never solved, but now someone's become martyred. That would be a sign of the digression of culture.
Hmm.
And the worst part about that for the organization is it will eventually show up in the results. The numbers will eventually reflect the ignorance, the arrogance. Hey, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So it says here the correct answer. So the opposite of tyrant, it says, is benefactor. The word tyrant means a cruel and oppressive ruler. Benefactor means someone who helps another person or cause.
Mm.
Now, this is where I want to go with this. Our culture is telling us, I think, if we're ownership, both explicitly and just in the narrative, the undertone is we should feel shame if we work. That's what I think culture is telling us. The greater business culture. You're working in your business. You're not, you should be doing less.
Mm-hmm.
That all of this BS, half truths, because there's value in hiring, in giving people space to do tasks that one once did. Half truths, very valuable. But when it's taken too far, we get disengaged ownership. Disengaged ownership goes against, we'll go back to the screen share, benefactor, right? Look, someone who helps another person or cause. How do you help another person or cause without being responsible? Well, what's responsibility? It's the ability to respond. People, we have to experience that. We can't just learn it through words. We must see it and feel it to verify it below awareness, to trust it. We will not follow a tyrant for long. We will eventually kill them and destroy them. It's in our freaking genes to arguably biology to survive from the species, to not follow a tyrant. Tyrant will end up killing all of us. They will lose themselves in power. They will fall off a cliff and we will follow them down. The benefactor means someone who helps another person or cause. How can I help my people if I'm not with them? My argument to business culture today, because this is the day that I live in, is that the owners of companies are being convinced, influenced, sold a half truth that they should feel ashamed for working, that they should be somewhere else doing something else. That it's someone else's job. And these are half truths. How that's actually integrated matters, because when ownership is disengaged, they are inherently they're not benefactors. They become tyrants. Because responsibility is modeled. You see it, you feel it, you touch it. Accountability is given or taken. It's like the distinction between actions and words. Not simple, practical. The person that's willing to go, and I'll use your company, for example, because I've learned this from listening to you. When Bill Reiman stops picking up the trash by the pool, at the construction site, his words have less weight to his people. Now, this is the thing. There are going to be people listening to this say, I don't have time to pick up the trash, and I'm not on the sites. And my argument to them is going to be, what culture do you want? You want America or you want North Korea? And if you want North Korea, you can do whatever the heck you want. I just won't work with you. If you want to read my book, or you want to, no, I mean, if you're willing to change, hell yeah, I'll work. Like, if you're willing to work, I'll try my best to like persuade you otherwise. I have to be open to that, or else I just become North Korea. This contradiction lives in everything. But like, what type of company do you want? What type of life do you want? What type of culture do you want? it gets deeper. Like, what type of life did the person want? They may say, I don't have time and I can't do it. Well, then I'll give you some case studies. I just had the founder of Hat World on yesterday, who then bought with his partner Scott um, lids. One of the things Glenn shared that I thought was interesting, not knowing that I'd bring this up on a show, was how he would go to the locations. There's 1,500. He'd end up at like store number 32, and he'd tell the person that was running that store, "Hey, here's some money. Go get some lunch. I'm gonna take your spot for a couple hours." Whoa.
Hmm.
But he didn't have time to do that. Well, what a, what's the impact? I mean, I'll just share what he said his impact, the impact of that was. I mean, what do you think the impact of that is? I don't even, what do you think the impact of something like that is?
You see, you see reality. You see how your store is getting managed and how what needs to be changed too. I mean, if they're running it wrong, you can make the change and tell them how or influence them on how running it correctly should look. You're seeing reality and you're showing that you're willing to get back into the trenches, even as a CEO on that level, and sit behind a desk and sell hats, which is a huge impact on the employee or the owner themselves that say, like you just said, I don't have time for that. Well, if the CEO of a company has time for it, everybody should have time for it, right?
All we have is time.
Mm-hmm.
What we choose to do with it reveals who we are as people. Time is the most abundant resource because it's all we have. People say it's the least abundant. They're afraid to die. They're probably living in ways that aren't good.
Mm-hmm.
They've yet to find something. I don't, I see it there. All we have is time. It's literally all we have is time. It's the most abundant thing
Mm-hmm.
because we are choosing what to do in each moment, how to treat each person, how to listen, how to tell the truth, how to um so and that's a philosophical quandary for another podcast with we could bring some people on to debate it, and then we'll really have a culture.
So,
So another example, Sam Walton, it's in his autobiography on his deathbed. He would go to these stores and he would measure the aisles and get involved. And as far as the right answer and the wrong answer, that's unclear because you could just look at the world. That becomes more of like a faith conversation. You could look at the world. There are different ways to govern people. There are different business models. And countries are like big companies. They govern people. They have different responsibilities and they're accountable in different ways. There are different ways to govern people. There are different ways to become, you know, if we're going to use the classical sense of success, like profit to the shareholders, people listening to this could shut it off in the first 10 minutes and think, you know, let me just go back to work. you know, the business is going to take on the life of the identity of a person. It's going to reflect who they are as a person. They're going to build what reflects their identity, their character, who they are as a person. There's a lot, like where I'm going with this is it's up to each person listening to this what type of leader they want to be, what type of culture they want to have. Do you want to have one that people are excited to come to, or do you want to have one where they feel like they have to? And that will, you know, I'm of the belief that in the long term, we're going to get out of people what we give to them. And that's going to come from what we do with our time and how we work.
Hmm.
And not everyone, like everyone has different personal goals that, of how they want to work and what they want to do. And, this is why some companies hold and some companies sell. And people change their mind. So maybe someone's listening to this and they're like, you know what? I'm changing my mind. I'm selling tomorrow because I don't want to work anymore. It's so clear that I just don't want to work anymore. And I'm destroying my life because I don't want to work anymore. And my culture stinks because I don't want to work anymore. And everyone knows that, even if they don't think about it, and they're reacting to it, and we're not making as much as we could, and we're not as successfully because could be because I'm not engaged. And there's others that are listening and they're like, I want to be more engaged. I want more. I want, I have something that I'm trying to create. I have something that I'm trying to say. I like what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about my work. I'm I'm enthusiastic about it. I get significant from who I get to work with and how, and the process excites me. I'm excited by the process and the outcome. I'm all in. I still want to sell because I want more resources. But I want them to fulfill my vision, not to buy a Lamborghini. Not to move to Phuket. I want to set up my kids with resources for education and security so they could go beyond. Maybe I didn't have those resources, security, and I had to figure it all out on my own. I want to set up my family, but I still want to work. I'm engaged. Like there's people, everyone's going to take this conversation. People are going to take this conversation differently in their own.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my challenge. Like I started Culture Matters to try to figure out what my culture was, who I was, what I was about, beyond just as an advisor, consultant, a teacher, someone that has to constantly be learning and constantly be teaching to fulfill what likely is just my DNA and my fate. Like, what's culture to you, Bill? What's culture to the people listening? Maybe someone's like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. Well, if you can't just quit now, you might have to do something you don't want to do. And that'll come down to who your dependents are. Who are you accountable to? Do your kids have college figured out? Do they have health care? Does your mother have a home? Does your father have a retirement? Does or is it just all about you? It's sick, the culture.
which
Maybe
I
literally like our cultures.
which I think a lot of the problem, especially in American culture, is people have made it about them more and more. Everything they do is more about them. It's no longer about, I mean, just off the top of my head, look at the birth rates. Birth rates are down. Why are birth rates down? Why are people having less children? Because they're making life more about them. We're taught and told, having a child is hard. Having a child is something that they're going to steal all your time. They're going to take away, uh, the good things of life. You're not going to be able to travel and do all these things. And that's what these people are being sold through, let's say, American culture now. But on the reverse angle of it, having a child is one of the biggest blessings you can possibly have. You get to raise a human being into something special, more special than yourself. You know, you've gone through all these trials, these tribulations in your life, these things, the good, the bad, and you can now raise something to be better than yourself. You know, and that is the gift that God gives you with a child, but that's not sold anymore. What's sold is it's all about you, right? And that's in a lot of different demographics of this country. One thing I wrote down, and as you were talking throughout this whole thing, I said the failure of a culture is the lack of communication, vision, leadership, and negative perception of time. I wrote that down because that our conversation that we just had that kind of pulled that all together. So I'll say it again, the failure of a culture is the lack of communication, vision, leadership, and negative perception of time. So I think coming off of what I just said, I think a lot of people have negative mindsets with all of those things. Like if you look through my list, lack of communication, less people are communicating these days in this country. Less people are dating. There's all these apps for that. They type to each other rather than physically communicate in person. Less people have vision. Well, what presses their vision? Well, they see social media. They see all these people, these celebrity, these people doing, and it almost creates envy towards success. Lack of leadership. People aren't taught to be leaders anymore. That leadership's a negative thing. You shouldn't be a leader. You should be a follower. You should, leaders are shunned upon. Negative perception of time. We just talked about that. I don't have time for that. Well, time is what you make of it, right? I'm coaching high school football now. I could easily say I don't have time to give back to kids, but I've made time to do it along with running multiple businesses. So it's all perception of what exactly what you said too. So truly, I think the what is defeating culture are those things.
What do you see vision as?
Having a vision for the future, being a visionary as far as like, for example, me with my company, let's go in a business perspective here because that's what we've been really talking about. Like me selling a vision of where we're going to be the largest custom home builder in the state of Florida. How are we going to get there? Selling that how. Here's how we're going to get there step by step. Having that plan for them, but constantly repeating the vision to them. Also selling the vision to my employees as well of saying, you all are going to, these luxury homes we build, you all are going to have one day because we're leaders amongst leaders. That's what you want to create in a company, leaders amongst leaders, not just one leader. So having that vision for them that what they're doing is going to get them to from point A to point B, instead of just making it about me, me, me. I want to do this. I want to be the largest luxury builder in the state of Florida. No, I always say we. Everything I say is we, our team, we. If you look at anything I post, it's we, it's us. It's not just me, you know? And I think a lot of business owners have a problem with just making it about me. Instead, it should be about us. It should be about we. It should be about the team. It should be about the culture. It should be about the group because that's what's going to get you there. It's not me. I can't do it alone. People think they can do it alone. Well, Godspeed, my friend, because no major CEO's ever done it alone. So, and when you figure that out, which I'll admit took me a little bit to kind of get past that, but it is huge because then I think with business, the right people start flowing into your company, and then that's where the culture really starts to form and take shape because you're no longer a business about just yourself. You're a business about making others into millionaires, making other people have success, making other people around you happy and their families happy. And for other generations and their families coming to work for an environment uh that because I have a guy right now. He asked me if his brother, he has a twin brother, he's like, hey Bill, I got a twin brother, he wants a job too, he'd love to work with us here. It's like that type of thing, man, bringing in those people. I have another guy that wants to bring in his girlfriend, probably going to be a fiance at some point, just because the culture is there. They want to be a part of this because they're going to win. That's the thing. It's not just about me, it's about them. That's what vision. Sorry, that was in a long vision answer there. So
How about communication?
I think communication is over communicating any possible way to the clients, any possible way to your employees. If you have a problem with an employee, you directly communicate to them the issue. You don't do it in front of people. If there's problems with the team, we discuss as a team together. Each person gets kind of an opportunity to talk about that problem, give their opinions. Opinions do matter within an organization, so that's why we have team meetings once a week. Everybody gets their turn to talk. Everybody gets to communicate together. On the customer angle of it, just over communicating through processes, everything that's going on, good and bad. If you mess up, admit it. That's a form of communication. Don't lie about it. Timelines are a form of communication, being honest about your timelines. I can go on and on with communication, but it's just just telling the truth, having integrity, uh, honesty, and just not holding back, because I think a lot of people with communication hold back because I've talked about this. They worry about the outcome more than actually the outcome's going to be. They're envisioning an outcome, a bad, negative outcome, so they don't talk, they don't communicate because their minds just process a lot of negative. How many negative thoughts do we have a day? So I think that's why people hold a lot in rather than just talking, especially like me with my parents. Like I've learned to communicate with my dad. If I have a problem, I go to him now. I just say it. I used to hold it back because I was worried about the outcome, but me holding it back is not going to fix the problem. And I've said this with my siblings too, because I've gotten so good at it, just gotten better at it. I've told my sister, like, if you have a problem with dad, you need to sit down with him. There may be tears, there may be emotion. That's all okay because he's going to feel the emotion too. He's going to see the emotion, but you're going to tell him what is truly bothering. His reaction could be good or bad, more than likely good, but in your mind saying it's going to be bad. So that's what's telling you not to do it. So, and I think that's what holds a lot of people back is they're afraid of the outcome. But when you just go and do it, the outcome's usually pretty good. Probably 90%, maybe 85, depending on the situation. But our minds are trained for the negativity aspect of it. So that's why a lot of people are afraid to talk.
How do you think that affects leadership?
Huge, because if you're afraid to talk, how can you be a leader? If you're afraid to tell people what the issues are, how can you be a leader? If you're afraid to what they're going to say back to you, how can you be a leader? You even said it too. I mean, communication, dialogue, culture, everything is two different sides, two different opinions, having a full conversation. And I've gotten better with that too, whether it's political, and I think that's a huge problem with the country too. You got right and left, and there's no happy medium because there's no discussion. Discussion isn't a topic. You can't just have an honest discussion. There's few people that can. There's debates that happen, and debates actually bring more thought. So if I believe one thing and I have a debate with somebody and it's a friendly debate and discussion, it's going to make me think about their perspective too. But that comes with just being educated, being wiser individual and just not shunning down everybody and their opinions too. Um, that's kind of been huge with me too, is I'm open to hearing other sides. I don't shut them down. I did it with my wife recently with her brother and her sister-in-law have different opinion on stuff, and I say think about their opinions and respond with an educated response. Don't respond with hate or argument or just because we build it up and we just respond with something fast that doesn't make sense. Respond with something educated that they really can't counter and will make them think back. They'll make them process it and think. And that's what she did. Conversation went a lot better. So,
You said if you're afraid to talk, how can you be a leader?
yeah, because leaders have to be outspoken. Leaders have to lead. I mean, if I'm captaining a big ship and let's say a battleship, and I don't talk and there's a enemy approaching and I don't say a word about it, we're all going to die. But if I'm the leader and I tell this guy to go to that point, this guy to go to that point, and I have a good culture where they trust me, they there's a tight niche culture and they have my back, they're going to do it. But that all comes with communication to them, understanding, listening's a huge thing that a lot of people struggle with too. Just talking to them about life, talking to people not just about business but how their kids are, on a daily basis. Not just keeping it strictly business, but if you don't talk, how can you be a leader? I mean, there's your voice is everything. If I was intimidated all the time talking, worried all the time with a worried voice or distraught or just sad all the time, I'm going to bring negative leadership. I'm going to bring a negative culture. But if I'm happy, I show up, no matter what's going on in my life, I just get it done. People are going to see that and they're going to be like, wow, that's somebody that can handle a lot of stuff. And that's somebody I want in my, on my battlefield. So I guess if that answers the question.
Um, I wrote this down. Getting us as in like us, those of us on social platforms, that are getting information from clips.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever's listening, if we're on social platforms, right? We're on, and we're getting our information from clips, only clips, right? Short sentiments of what those have to say. Others outside of ourselves have to say about things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going through the experience of getting to that same outcome. That makes our culture less educated, wise, and self-aware.
True.
And that brings, you want to talk about things that shape culture. Do we read? What do we read? How do we read and or listen? But, you know, both. If you can't read, learn Braille. If you don't read, start. The person that can read that doesn't isn't going to beat the person that doesn't, or that can't rather. Right? The person that can read that does not read won't beat the person that can't read.
Hmm.
Writing, I really leaned into the podcast because it was an opportunity to practice listening. to practice a component of leadership, a necessary component of leading. And it's helped me evolve.
Mhm.
It's led to a culture, because the Culture Matters podcast is my culture. I know everyone on it, and they know me. Not just know, but to know them. And you said the speaking, that's where I'm at in my journey today, where there was a time where all I did was read and listen and speak because I felt unheard and I didn't listen. And then I stopped speaking and then I started writing and realized that I should stop speaking and start listening. And so I read and I wrote and I listened. And now I've been listening, reading, and writing. And now I've got to speak. So I've got to read and write, listen, and speak.
Mhm.
There's nowhere in 30 Days of Thought that it says listen. It says read to think, write to develop, speak to let go. There's nowhere does it say listen, because that's not where I was in my journey
Mhm.
to culture. As the podcast evolved, I realized that I didn't listen, and I need to lean into that and be able to do it. Not just understand that it's good to do it, but practice it. And now I feel ready to speak again. But as not because I desire to be heard, more because I have something to say. So, this is all a meditation for me. I like business. It's fun. I like money. It's necessary for education, for housing, for the limitations of experience within the type of system that we have. I'm not going to throw it all away and go and throw all my responsibility away and walk around the earth with bare feet here. I'm going to be the father of a family and a steward, a responsible citizen that pays taxes and accountable to my governing structures. So I better be, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm going to be the best entrepreneur I could possibly be. How I work with people, how I treat people, and how well we do. Um, how well our people do, right? Is there job growth? Or another podcast, but that piece that we the original question, like how is how I recall, at least, like how I work along the people that we've been able to work with. It's like Tolstoy, patience and time, because experience is going to teach the person that doesn't give up. Experience is going to teach the person that gives up. But what I've learned is in the really hard times, when the people that we care about, when we're all learning the hard way for what we didn't hear, what we couldn't hear, we didn't listen to, for we didn't understand, for the choices that were unmade, you know, as a leader, if I'm there for the people, we're just going to grow through those times,
Mhm.
playing the long game. It's like if the timeline is out enough, and yeah, some will fall away, some will elevate, new relationships will form because I am continuing to become the product that I'm attempting to sell. Like I said, I'm I haven't been speaking. So that's a part of culture. You called me out. If you're afraid to talk, how can you be a leader? Well, you won't. So that's why I'm on the podcast. That's why I'm doing podcasts. I I don't need to speak anymore. I have something to say. I'd like to not forget how to listen as I do it. Reading, writing, like that's, you know, culture matters as a philosophy is about that. It's like at some level, most likely, like it's like me calling out for my liberal arts education I never received. And so, yeah, that's good for a bit small business because we've got to learn how to work with people and get things done. And part of that is learning these fundamental uh, skill sets and behaviors to be better people that could be better managers of small businesses. So that's something that comes to mind is like the experience of getting that same outcome, the same whoever we're following on online or on TV or that's giving us wisdom. We don't want to miss out on the process that got them to that outcome. Because the thought we can, oh, I understand what they're saying. Well, I might conceptualize it, but I'm not yet doing it. I'm not yet capable of doing it because I'm still learning through experience. I'm still learning through experience. I'm still learning how to integrate that thought into actions and interactions. And we're all of us listening. We're all me, you. We're all on this journey together, experiencing life together. Let's not lose sight of the process of learning how to be the leaders, how to be the business owners. You know, I'm on that journey too, and my uh, yeah, I'm on that journey too, and now I'm ready to speak again.
Hmm.
But I'm not just going to speak. I'm going to listen. I'm going to continue reading and writing and you know being challenged, being open to being challenged, trying to live a life, you know, trying to be. I'm just going to say live a life of culture. It's like yeah, you know, be a person, an individual, have a family, be capable of family, community, uh, citizenry, entrepreneurialism. Is the pursuit of influence and power going to consume me or reveal me for my potential as a person? So, uh, yeah, all we have is time. If I want to get something done, I give it to the busiest person. I communicate as quickly as I can. I keep my word, and if I don't, I apologize. I I tell the truth. I if I'm afraid to, why? I have advisors. I damn well must. I am one. I read. I interview great people. I am. I don't speak enough. Bill's right. I'm ready. You know, their culture is a consequence of service. Because if you think about it, let's say that somebody's closing on a house today. There are people that are going to show up and that could be their last day on earth. If they knew it was their last day on earth that morning for the closing, would they show up to the closing?
Hmm.
I think you could judge a person's character based on that thought experiment. It's like if the person doesn't show up for the closing, that person doesn't get the house. And what does the house mean? Well, it's their time. Like they're a part of the community. It's their opportunity to have security, safety, protection, the walls necessary for family, their culture. Maybe they don't have kids yet to blossom. It, everyone there for that closing is serving that person. If they all knew that day it was their last day on earth, would they show up to the closing? They by showing up on their last day on earth, they're giving up everything they could be doing for themselves for that person to get what they want. There's something beautiful in that and tragic because we're dying, but we're all that person. And the beauty of work is we get compensated for that. So not only would someone else do it for us, people do it for us every day. They sacrifice the future for our present. Strangers sacrifice their future for my present every day. And they get compensated for that because that money will be their future present
Hmm.
that I'm sacrificing my present for their future. Everyone that showed up to that closing could they don't know when they're going to die. So it's their last day on earth and they're showing up. They're sacrificing their potential, their future for the person getting the house is present. Like there's something in that is very deep. And the person that doesn't show up to work and the person that doesn't tell people why is is stealing from themselves. They're stealing from their neighbor, their stranger that's getting, that's that's benefiting from the present. They're taking from their present. That, who wants to be with the work with those people? They're living for themselves. They're living in the moment. Do they ever have a life? They don't have a future. They just have a moment. And I would argue they're living through the past. There are things they haven't conquered that have conquering them. Work, like having the work it like teaches us how to live. We're too young of a species to know how to live without work.
Hmm.
So that would be my challenge to the listener. It's like, you might need work to learn how to live. And after you figure that out, it'll probably be time for you to die. You don't know when you're going to die. So get to work. And yeah, okay. Well, what about my kid's game? What about it? Talk to the kids, talk to the wife, talk to the family. What's the plan? What are you guys doing together? What's the plan? Why are you even doing this? Where are you going? And maybe you're not the owner. You're an employee. And that's one of the benefits of being an employee. You don't have to have the business consume you. You can just stop at a certain period of time and get the benefit of the business consuming someone else's life. Life is not fair. Charlie Munger, life is too unfair to give to undeserving. Life is not fair enough to give to undeserving people. Damn, I think I just said it wrong. Life is too unfair to give to undeserving people. It is trade-offs. Like maybe on the next episode, we could talk about how we shouldn't glorify entrepreneurs. It's sick. And it undermines all the damn employees that give us the opportunity. I talk about this with our employees a lot. Like, you know, they get it on our team. That, I wouldn't, they're not trying to trade places with me. I at some level, I'd like to be them. It reminds me of what Alexander the Great said to Diogenes the cynic when he was a homeless philosopher, like never they called him the dog. I think he was like dirty and he slept outside, he was homeless, and is a story Alexander said when he met him, whatever you want, I'll give you whatever you want. Tell me what do you want? And Diogenes the cynic said, yes, I'd like you to step out of my sunlight, because he was standing where there was a shadow blocking out the sun. There's nothing Alexander the Great could offer to Diogenes the cynic. Alexander never lost a battle. He conquered the known world. There's nothing that he could give him. Alexander said, if I wasn't Alexander, I would be Diogenes. I love that story because it's a dichotomy of the entrepreneur and the employee. Hmm. If we self-glorify Alexander, we miss the beauty of the relationship between the leadership or the ownership and the people. It's a give-take relationship. No one's better than the other, but they're all necessary. We can easily lose sight of that. When the entrepreneur condemns and criticizes and undermines their people long enough, they will eventually be killed by them. And good riddance. Good.
Love it, man. Love it. We can we can go on for hours and hours. We'll definitely have you back on. One thing I wanted to leave it with is one thing you said that stuck out to me is live a life of culture. And I think after this conversation today, it's like you said, people can take their culture and determine it kind of based off of what we said or kind of molded into their own way too. But we all live our own culture. Um, and it's going to take me a lot of time, more time to get into all that too. But culture's everything. Culture is so important, and culture matters. I mean, culture matters. So, Jay, man, it's been awesome having you on. We're gonna have you on the show multiple times, and I already wrote down for next show because I think that is a huge topic. We shouldn't glorify entrepreneurs, especially online ones, because you see a lot of people trying to be a lot of the influencer entrepreneurs online too. And we are our own person, and we all have our own things that are special about us. So, yeah, man, this was great conversation. Appreciate you having you on. Where can people find Jay Doran?
I'm still looking for
Where can they
him. Just,
connect online? LinkedIn?
just text me 267-885-6418. Just don't send me any nudes. I don't want any feet pics or anything.
Now you're going to get a lot of nudes.
How do you know that wasn't on purpose? If Bill knows my wife, I'm in trouble now.
Yeah. Jenna. Yeah, exactly.
Two six
Now,
seven 885-6418. Just send me a text, call me, leave a voicemail.
no, man, this has been awesome. Appreciate your time. Everybody go check out the Culture Matters podcast as well. You get to hear more Jay Doran and a lot of great people on his podcast. He's up to 550 something episodes, right, Jay? Something like that.
Well, we've released 327. Actually, our mutual friend, the real Brian Hess, just went out on there, episode 327 as of last night. But there's 200 plus in the queue, and 15 that I have to record between now and June 1st. And then and that'll be where we're at. So whatever that ends up being, I think it's like 207.
Wow.
So plus the 327 plus the six, it's 15 because this was the 16, but this is me going on. There's plenty of content there, and
Go check it out, everybody. Go check out Culture Matters. Jay, thank you so much for being on the Real Build. Appreciate you, brother. This was awesome, man. Great conversation as always. And everybody listening out there, take time, like, share, subscribe. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys too. And I will see you guys on the next episode.